There's an ongoing discussion, ongoing debate about which is better, ebooks, electronic books, or physical books. Despite the number of articles and the number of conversations that have taken place over this topic, the debate isn't settled, even years later. Still today, people are asking, what should I use? So join me today as I share with you my thoughts on that. And I do so specifically from a biblical worldview. And stick with me to the end as I share with you 3 tips on how best to use whatever platform you choose to use. Well, the debate rages on. What is better, physical books or digital books? Despite the number of articles and the number of discussions that have been had on this topic, it appears that we're not finished. People are still asking this question, and everybody has their opinion. But I want to take a moment today and share with you my own thoughts, but from a biblical worldview, because I'm not seeing this addressed as Christians who need to be discerning. And so we can talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each, and we will, very briefly, but I think there's a question that precedes it that we need to consider first. And that is, are digital books even biblical? Should we be using them? And I would tell you they're not unbiblical. Technology is a gift. We should see it as such, that God has equipped us in this unique way, and that we can leverage technology for His glory. And yet we are humans using a resource that can be corruptible by our sin nature. And so yes, I would say they're not unbiblical, but we need to remember that we can use it in a very unbiblical way. And this includes our use of digital books. And therefore, we need to exercise caution. We must remember that aspect, no matter what we're doing, including in this instance. So as we look at this and consider, what are the advantages and disadvantages, I suspect that enough of you have sufficient experience that you can answer that on your own. You probably already have your thoughts of what are the advantages and disadvantages. And certainly, there are all the articles out there that could answer that for you. But I want to share just some of what I think are the most important things to consider, especially as a Christian. For me, personally, I prefer hard copy books. I love the experience of being able to open a beautifully designed book and interact with the pages. I love the touch of just turning from page to page, of feeling the paper beneath my fingers. And sometimes books that are especially designed, given attention to their beauty, can invoke this sense of remembering who God is through them. I love being able to take in a book where the editors were very, very cautious in making sure they did something that was extraordinarily beautiful. And the other thing that a book has, as strange as it may sound, is it's got a unique smell. I realized or learned that I thought I was strange for doing that, and I realized that most book lovers smell their books. But why? Because a physical book has a whole unique experience to it. It's an opportunity to interact and to use your senses with every book that you read. And so obviously, or my preference is a physical book. But I also recognize there are other advantages and disadvantages. Interestingly enough, both physical books and ebooks have their cost advantages. For the physical book, one of the biggest things is we can buy used. There's a cost savings there. We can go into a used bookstore or search online and buy a used book. As Christians, there's one barrier there, and that's if we're looking for solid theological resources. Finding those used is hard. because those are the books that people hold on to. A lot of people will discard those really awful, horrible books that have no meat to them because they didn't help them. They served a time, served a purpose, they've read it once, they don't need it anymore. But a really well-written book that is heavy on God's truth is something that will stick with you, that you're always referring to. And so people will hold on to them. And if they do get rid of them, they're usually giving them to somebody. That doesn't mean they're not out there, though. If you search in a used bookstore or online, you can find them. And so there is that aspect of it. Also, as Christians, we should be provoking others to read good books. And a physical book allows us to do that because we can directly hand it over to share. It's not easy to do that with an ebook. And so if we want to see other people grow, if we want to provoke their spiritual growth, we can hand them a book that we said, this is a good book, you need to read it. And have an influence on their spiritual life. Probably the two biggest disadvantages, one, interestingly enough, is a lack of privacy. Sometimes we have to read books for classes or for research that aren't necessarily great books. In fact, they would be ones we would not promote. And yet if you're seen reading it, somebody might automatically assume. And so if you're reading a physical book in public, it's pretty easy to see a lot of times what book you're reading. You can't necessarily hide that. So there's no privacy there, especially if you don't want to promote something. Another aspect of it is just the space and the weight that a physical book takes up. I think most of us know that on an ebook platform, on a digital platform, we have this that can hold thousands of books, or we could carry this that's slightly bigger and measures just one book. Part of that just becomes, what is your lifestyle? Do you need access to your books and you're on the go? Then a digital book is probably more necessary for you. The availability, the portability, and the space is a huge advantage. Likewise, there is a cost factor for this. Oftentimes, one of the difficult things is you're having to buy the e-reader from $50 to $100, and then you're paying full price for a book. So I bought this for $50, for example, and then I still have to pay $10 for this, or I could just buy the physical book for $10. And so did I really gain much? With that said, you are more likely to see sales on the ebooks for $1.99, for $2.99. And if you're patient and if you don't need the book right away, it can be a huge savings. I have a lot of books I would love to have in my library or I want to read in the future, but not necessarily right now. I add them to my wish list, and then when they go on sale, I purchase them. Since I don't need them right away, I can be patient that way. So there is a cost savings there. It's really a matter of how you would most use it, though. There's also a health aspect. With the digital books, for those that have a hard time seeing, you can adjust the font size. You can move it bigger so that you don't have to strain your eyes. Whereas a physical book obviously is stuck at one font. With that said, there's also a negative health advantage, and that's the blue light. Research is continuously showing that this has negative effect on people, and therefore we need to be cautious in how we use it, particularly if we're reading in bed. Like computer light in general has been proven to keep us awake, to stimulate the brain and make us have a hard time going to sleep. And so if we're reading on some sort of portable device, that can impact our sleep too, whereas a physical book is more likely to relax us. So we have to consider that health issue. As Christians, we read, though, in order to grow. And what should concern us the most is retention. And studies are starting to show that when we read in an ebook or digital book, we have less of an ability to remember what we're reading. And if you can't remember it, you can't apply it. That should be very concerning. That should be something we're considering, because we're reading to grow and be transformed into the image of Christ. And yet if we're reading and forgetting, we can't do that. There are tools, there are things we can do to overcome that. But we have to be aware of it, and we have to take the initiative to do so. And so it's a matter of really what works best. For each person, the advantages and disadvantages are going to be weighted differently. It's a matter of your own lifestyle. I can't tell you what is most important. For me, portability is huge because I live in a foreign country, and trying to bring the books with me is difficult. And so I utilize ebooks quite a bit in that regard, despite preferring a hard copy book. As Christians, we have to consider things like that, especially we have these unique things called commentaries. This one by Douglas Moo is 1,010 pages. And when you have something like this that's laid out in a specific format that has Greek text and it has footnotes that you need to know or want to know, trying to read that in an ebook form is very difficult. So most Christians prefer a hard copy commentary. And yet, I also recognize that digitally, we can search a commentary much easier than we can when we have a physical copy. Type in a few key phrases and you have your answer for you. Again, the advantages and disadvantages really depend on your own personal lifestyle. So in light of all of that, what should you be using? Should you be using a physical book or should you be using a digital book? I really think there's a better way. I don't think it has to be either or, to be quite truthful. I don't think we have to choose, do I go all physical or do I go all digital? Really what it comes down to is your style of reading. What works for you? And only you can evaluate your life. And I'm not trying to give you a cop-out answer. I'm trying to be realistic here and say that you know how you read best. And so you have to do what works for your own reading. You have to do what works for your own study. And it may depend, are you reading just for enjoyment? Well, then maybe a digital book is better for you. If you're doing a lot of study, maybe you prefer a physical book. It just depends. And so I would tell you there's probably a mixture of both. It doesn't have to be either or. But I do think there's some things that we need to recognize. And so let me close out with 3 tips. First, depending what platform you use, whether you go physical or digital, but especially digital, it can be easy when you see a book on sale to buy it up. Oh, that book's on sale, that's a great book, I want it. And yet, I would tell you that if you bought that book and never read it, even if it was 99 cents or $1.99, and you saved $5, $10, $20, if you never read that book, you just wasted 99 cents or $1.99 or whatever it may be. And so really, you're wasting your money. So be cautious. Don't just pick up every deal that you see. Pick up what you're going to read or pick up research materials. And so be cautious there. The other thing I would tell you is if you're going to use ebooks, try to stick with one platform. There might be some exceptions to this. Some people might use a mixture of like Logos and something Kindle or the Kobo or whatever form it may be, or iBooks, because they're using it for different things. But for the most part, I would say stick with one platform. Either go all Kindle, go all iBooks, or whatever it may be that you prefer. That way you don't have your books spread across all these different platforms. The final tip I would tell you is, as much as you can, try to buy from the publisher. Sometimes you might have to pay shipping, but you're giving your money directly to a Christian organization, which is far better than giving it to a secular one. And oftentimes, if you order a certain amount anyway, they're going to waive shipping. If you're doing ebooks, a lot of these, for example, Westminster Theological Books or even Banner of Truth, offer an ebook form that is compatible with your e-reader, specifically if it's a Kindle book or if it's an iBook. Not so much the others. And so you can still get the ebooks you desire directly from the publisher. It's not only often cheaper, most of the time, but you're also, again, giving your money directly to them. And so I would urge you as much as possible, even though convenience says we can use Amazon for everything, to be mindful of how you're doing that. And so, really the conclusion is this: do what works for you. You can take in information, you can ask others what they think, and take that into account. But really, look at your own lifestyle. Experiment a little bit and determine what would work for you so that you learn the most that you can learn and get the most out of your reading that you can get out of it for the glory of God. Thank you for joining me. I hope that this was helpful for you, and I look forward to joining you again soon.